So my first question to you is it actually Russia-Ukraine conflict? Because there are so many other countries that are involved in it, and it often seems it's asymmetrical.
I would, put the question from this perspective. The basic Russian position is that to resolve the crisis, we should remove the root causes of this crisis. And I would suggest to talk about that. But before entering into the discussion, I would like to introduce myself just for the audience. And then I don't know what would be the timing restrictions for you, but I'm okay with with the prolonged discussion or questions which will be coming from the audience if to benefit your program today to the maximum possible extent. So I'm here in India for a long time already. This is my third posting in Delhi. I'm here from the mid-2000s, and I worked here in various capacities. But the title of your event today is another, explanation or a very interesting, aspect that being a specialist on India, we ultimately became specialists on Ukraine as well, because this is one of the major topics of our agenda, since it is interfering into our bilateral cooperation. It is part of the global agenda, inevitable part, unfortunately, and with ups and downs. But let us move on step by step. As I said, the basic and most important part of the Russian position is that in order to resolve this crisis, we need to remove the root causes of this crisis. Having said that, I would stress that this crisis started not in 2022. It started much earlier. I would put it that way, that it probably started after the disintegration of the Soviet Union in 1991. Until that moment, Ukraine has never been an independent state in the history. After it became part of the Russian Empire in the 17th century, the territory was mostly developed by the Russian emperors. It was protected by the Russian soldiers, and actually this territory means to us a lot, meaning that we cannot allow anyone to use this territory, which we invested so much in terms of human lives and construction of the whole cities, and the development of the offshore area, and making Russia the Black Sea power, to use it against Russia. So after the disintegration of the Soviet Union, Russia was probably naive to believe that the West would offer equal cooperation with us. But nevertheless, despite the promises of not expansion of NATO, which is a Cold War era bloc, which in fact has lost its relevance after the Cold War ended, but still, they promised us verbally at the leaders' level, with no documents signed, that NATO would never expand. But what we have seen in 1990s and early 2000s, 7 waves of NATO expansion. So NATO was moving closer to the Russian borders, and playing with the young elite of the post-Soviet republics like Ukraine or Georgia, by interfering into their domestic affairs in staging, orchestrating their color revolutions inside that countries, using the anti-Russian card in order to make their presence more solid there, in order to get some access to these areas. And ultimately, when we were resisting to these policies by various means, they started imposing sanctions against Russia. So my first conclusion is that Ukraine is not the reason for the unilateral sanctions against Russia, but the pretext for this sanctioning Russia, to pressurize it, because Russia is too big and too independent and too powerful. It cannot be defeated either on battlefield or economically. As we coming a bit, forward, you see the statistics, how strong the Russian economy is right now. It is growing 4% per year as compared to those countries which imposed the sanctions from Europe. They grow at average 1% or so. But it's another story, but of course part of it. So along with that, all these processes were followed by the growing competition between the centers of power, resulting in the crisis of globalization. Because we have seen the rise of India, the rise of China and Russia, and the West was by all means wanting to retain its dominance over this, interference in domestic affairs, regime change policies, and acting purely on false pretexts like human rights standards set up by the West, including the neoliberal nature, which are alien to our traditional values. So then ultimately they sponsored the anti-constitutional coup in Ukraine in 2014, where the power in the country was hijacked by a neo-Nazi minority. And the West supported them to come to power, and ultimately was the only source of support of this power in Ukraine. The rest of the country, which, Ukraine is also multinational, multi-religious society. Almost 80% of population were Russian-speaking at that time. The eastern regions of Ukraine were civilizationally close to Russia. Russia never objected to the diversified foreign policy of Ukraine, because it is located between Russia and Europe, and naturally they would develop the relations with everyone. But anyway, so that they put it in an ultimatum-like condition: either we go with Russia or the West. Certainly, this coup was not supported by the Russian-speaking population, and those who were not accepting this neo-Nazi regime in Kiev, which was anti-Russian in its nature, they became the target for the new Kiev regime. Not target politically and economically, but militarily. Military means as well. These people became the targets for heavy weapons and the policy of genocide. Of course, Russia could not just sit and wait for what happens next. Of course, we were supporting these regions. Ultimately, the first step was to support Crimeans, which this is the peninsula, which is located in the Black Sea, which is totally consisting of the Russian population, and they deliberately voted for accession to Russia in 2014, right after this coup happened. And when all of us realized that this issue the Kiev regime wanted to resolve by force, Russia was protecting this population, and as a part of this protection was the decision to accept Crimea as a new region of Russia. The following events were with the accession of other regions, other 4 regions of Ukraine, who for the same reasons wanted to become part of Russia, not to be part of this anti-Russian policy by the Kiev regime. For us, it's not a matter of territories. We never wanted to. Russia is too big to claim new territories. So what does it mean to have new territories? It's a challenge. It's a challenge economically. It's in terms of demography, in terms of the social programs, etc. So, well, it's a burden for the state. But still, the protection of lives of people are more important than that. So, and ultimately, these new territories have become Russian. It was the only way to protect them from genocide. It all happened with a totally one-sided approach by the Western countries. They never seen the violation of human rights and even killing of innocent people of that Russian-speaking population in the eastern part of Ukraine, the then eastern part of Ukraine. They blamed in all problems. They used to blame Russia. So Russia is supporting separatism. Russia is invading, etc., etc., and so forth. So it is without understanding of the root causes of this crisis, we cannot move ahead in realizing what is the way forward. So it was totally one-sided coverage by the Western media in what's going on. They were claiming that Russia is the aggressor state. They are targeting Ukraine, so they are violating of territorial integrity of Ukraine, and so on and so forth. Absolutely putting blind eye on what was committed by the Kiev regime. So this is a genocide policy against everything Russian concerned. They prohibited the right of expression. They prohibited the Russian language, Russian literature, Russian culture, and even Orthodox Church. If you look at the situation from a bit a different corner, so look if, for example, Ireland at one day would prohibit English language, what would be the reaction of London? Or, for example, in Switzerland, which is a four-language country, if one of them will be prohibited. The problem is very serious, but actually it is absolutely ignored by the Western society because of a one-sided coverage. One of the reasons was that Russian media companies, media outlets were prohibited in the West. So the people have no other alternative coverage, alternative broadcasting about what's going on. One of the issues I would like to clarify, which is also important to India, this is the principle of territorial integrity. So let me put it that way, that every situation is different in nature. So we cannot compare what's going on in the South Asian region, what's going on in Ukraine, and other territorial problems, which are in fact we inherited from the decolonization, right? So when decolonization started, the first and foremost principle was self-determination of nations. That is the basis of the modern system of the international relations, which was established after the Second World War. As far as territorial integrity principle is concerned, according to the Declaration of Principles of International Law of 1970, these principles pertains only to those governments who represent the whole nation which they are governing. So with no prejudice to race, language, and other parameters. So this is not the case for the Kiev regime, because they do not represent those people who stood against the anti-constitutional coup. So that's why the principle of territorial integrity doesn't pertain to Kiev regime and to these claims. So this is an important clarification, because actually sometimes people who are far from this crisis do believe that actually this is the principle which was violated by Russia or so well. But what we really want to say that all our actions were first reactive, so we were responding to these challenges which we were facing. Second, actually, everything was done in the full accordance with the international law, including the special military operation which we have launched in February 2022, because these regions which were targeted by the Ukrainian forces after the Russian proposal of the collective security guarantees were rejected in the end of 2021 and early 2022. And when they decided to resolve the Russian issue by force, they approached us for the protection, and then we responded to this request. And according to the international law, we were protecting them. According to the international law, we were helping to conduct the referenda and all these territories which voted in favor of the accession to Russia, for example. And we were again so one-sidedly blamed for some violations or something that we did wrong. Well, ultimately they again do not mention why they did no any referenda in the former Yugoslavia and other places. So this is again something which you never would see in the Western coverage of this situation. So what else is important, that as soon as this special military operation started in 2022, we immediately started negotiations with the Ukrainians, and we were very close to the deal. And even we have got the text of the peace agreement, already, agreed by the Ukrainian side, with all the, conditions met, and that was acceptable to us. But if you remember correctly, in April 2022, Kyiv was visited by Boris Johnson, the then Prime Minister of Great Britain, and who said that stop talking to Russians, you should continue fighting. After that, we have seen a number of serious provocations for which, again, Russia was blaming, like Bucha, for example, etc. So, well, those died bodies which were lying on the streets of the city named Bucha. We asked for investigation. We asked for the list of those people who they were claiming that Russia was killing. So, well, but we never seen any response. A number of notes to the Secretary General of the United Nations we have sent to asking to help and to facilitate these investigations. No response at all. Because unfortunately, another aspect of this crisis is that the international dialogue becomes politicized to quite a considerable extent. The West are enjoying his majority in all the international bodies, and most of them just trying to expel Russia from the membership or push forward anti-Russian decisions. So the same is true for such crucial bodies like the United Nations, like the Secretariat of the United Nations, like UNESCO, like OPCW, and other organizations of critical importance, which become extremely politicized with no sign of objectivity, and without having Russia as the most experienced country in the fight against terrorism, in the fight against spread of chemical weapons and nuclear weapons, and as the strongest and one of the biggest contributors to the humanitarian cooperation under the umbrella of UNESCO and others. So purely on political pretexts, these restrictions were imposed on us. Ultimately, the claim that Russian war, so-called Russian war in Ukraine, caused the crisis in food security and energy security of the world is totally false, because this crisis, these disruptions happened because of unilateral sanctions, because these sanctions rediverted, supply chains. And certainly, so well, it required time and other efforts to reestablish them, because they wanted to isolate us by all means, economically, and in terms of being the biggest partner for other countries, like India, for example. This, resulted, in fact, that. But who is the biggest beneficiary of that? Of course, the United States, because they achieved the most desired geopolitical outcome they wanted since the 20th century, to separate Russia and Europe. To deprive Europe of the cheap Russian energy resources, and to deprive Russia of the advanced technologies of Europe. So suffered both. Of course, actually, I don't want to say that actually we are not suffering from the sanctions. Of course, it's, but it is negatively affecting ordinary people, because they became, they had to re-establish themselves in the new realities, and actually not. Usually, Russia and Europe was again the something a united space, so to say, because we were coming closer to each other throughout the history with ups and downs. So, but now even the Switzerland, which claims as a neutral state, is following the suit of Brussels. So is developing its national security strategy of the European security, not with Russia, but against Russia. So this is a completely different reality. We have to admit that the world is changing, and for us, the basic preconditions for the settlement of this crisis are not just plain ceasefire, because actually it will not resolve this problem at all, because they will use the time for redeploy the troops and to supply more and more weapons to Ukrainians, which are deliberately targeting the civilian infrastructure, unlike us, because we don't do that. You would ask why we are moving so slow. That's the reason why we move slow while liberating these territories, because actually we are very careful and precise in targeting exactly and solely the military infrastructure of that side. So for us, it's important that actually the settlement should include the neutral, non-nuclear status of Ukraine, as it used to enjoy before that. Ukraine not to be a party to any military bloc. The realities on the ground should be recognized, including the territorial ones. Ukrainian troops should be withdrawn from that eastern regions. Sanctions should be removed, and all the neo-Nazi legislation should be cancelled. Important point is that why they use neo-Nazi card against Russia, because actually this is the problem which is emanating from the events of 80 years ago history, when the Second World War was ended by the defeat of Nazi Germany. With the major contribution was made by the then Soviet Union, when we lost 27 million of people. Because actually it was a genocide by Nazi Germany against all the Slavic nations, and Russia first of all. For us, it's something, but it's more than just a history. It's a turning point in the security architecture globally. But Ukrainians were using this card because the part of the then Ukrainian territory was collaborating with the Nazis. And still, actually, this is they just revived this, memory. And despite all the, decisions made after the Second World War, including the creation of the United Nations, Nuremberg Tribunal, and others, again, the West is turning blind eye on this revival of neo-Nazi ideology in the West. But anti-Russian card, what they are playing, is the only reason why they can get the support by the West. Now Zelensky is the president of war, because last year his legitimacy was ended. And until war continues, he remains in power. So that's where we are. So the negotiations have started finally. We should give the relevant credit to President Trump, who was committed himself to the contribution to the peace process, and that's why they have to participate. The recent events of before the second round, when they have started these, terrorist attacks against the civilian infrastructure and the military facilities, were absolutely designed to sabotage negotiations, because no one of them is interested in peace talks, neither Ukrainians nor the Europeans, because Europeans are still dreaming on inflicting a strategic defeat on Russia. But so they are unable to do so, and that's why they need the American potential. Trump is not willing to prolong this conflict. It was his pre-election promise, and they have quite a constructive dialogue with President Putin. And when Trump realized how much the US has lost after the sanctions were imposed on Russia in such a big way, so about $300 billion just actually that could be a benefit. It is a lost benefit for the American economy. So certainly, Trump as a businessman is seeing a lot of perspective in how we can reestablish relations and go ahead. But for that, we need to stop the war. So that's where we are. Just very briefly. If you have any questions or any clarification, let's discuss, because actually I don't want to lecture you. This is the perspective which we are, are based on in our analysis of the situation, which we are, based on when we deal with the Indian partners, and we should also highly appreciate the Indian position on this crisis, because India remains neutral. It remains open for cooperation. It is not recognizing sanctions and unilateral approaches. It always insisted on the listening to everyone. So, and we did a lot to re-establish our partnership bilaterally, because Russia right now became one of the biggest trading partners for India, the biggest energy supplier, and the new prospects opened for us given this situation, because we are based on our national interests, and nothing could really affect this partnership.
Yes. No, I agree with you, sir, regarding the kind of mediation that Russia had tried to do in 2021. In fact, Ambassador Fabian, who was there last year with us in one of the podcasts, actually brought it into light that how the Biden administration had not taken note of it. Also, 2 days back, something very interesting happened, and I'm quoting this. The US Commerce Secretary Lutnick said that India has done some things that rub the US the wrong way. For instance, you buy your military gear from Russia, and then India is part of BRICS. That's not really the way to make friends in America. To which one response was that India was buying military gear from Russia or Soviet Union at that point of time because US was arming Pakistan. Nixon really pushed India into actually having some kind of foreign policy or bilateral relations with Soviet Union, especially after his actions in 1971, including sailing the Enterprise fleet into the Bay of Bengal during the time when Bangladesh was liberated. Also, for the students, I would like to say that our source of information regarding Russia is mostly through media or through social media. Now, let me tell you that if you go on even social media and try to write something which is including the Russia keyword, you will be logged out of your account. That is the amount of surveillance. So, my question to you, sir, is that what does Anurag is asking this question. Recently, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Shoku spoke about reviving Russia, India, China trilateral forum. Do you see that RIC would play any role in helping resolve the issue conflict between Ukraine and Russia?
May I respond?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. But let me start with the first, point you have raised about the position of the U.S. Regarding the defense cooperation between Russia and India and BRICS. So please feel the difference. The relations which we have with India, they are lasting many decades. This is the trust which we have earned through the equal partnership. Have a look. From the very beginning, our relations were transformative and, witnessing a lot of periods, difficult times, but remained stable. We were commonly guided by the willing to end colonization. We were together when it was the era of industrialization. Then mentioned by you events of 1971-72. Then common space exploration. Then we were navigating through globalization, digitalization, and now the current turbulence, which we commonly aspire to evolve as a multipolarity. We have invested a lot in these relations. This trust cannot be, get just overnight. It took a lot of efforts, and this is a DNA in our two peoples that we are friends. And Russia has never lectured India, even when it was a superpower during the Cold War. The relations has always been equal, and we never objected India to deal with any other country. India is a huge power. It is a emerging superpower. Of course, having diversified foreign policy. We know how important it is to cooperate with the US. 4 million diaspora, the biggest trade and investment technological partner. That means a lot. And how many education and investment and labor opportunities you are getting from the US. That's important. That cannot be denied and ignored. And certainly we never put a condition to India. So, well, we will deal with you, but you should stop your relations with the US. It's not the way of, of mature relationship and, serious business. And our relations were never targeted against each other. We never asked India to do something against its interests. More so, Russia was very supportive, especially at some periods of time. We are perfectly fine with for India dealing with the US, even in sophisticated areas, but importantly not at the expense of the Russian interests. Likewise, BRICS. BRICS is never targeting against anyone, unlike the Western-led coalitions or organizations like G7, which became an totally anti-Russian club on interests. So, BRICS is overweighting G7 by the economic parameters. We never used BRICS to accumulate the allies or partners against somebody. It is based on consensus. Even de-dollarization trend. This is an objective trend. By the way, it is not, Russia who decided to reject US dollar, but Russia was, deprived of using US dollar, like many other countries who are under sanctions. So it was not our choice initially. So that's why it would be just incorrect to blame us, Russia, and other BRIC nations for, moving towards the alternative use of national currencies. When dollar is used as a weapon, of course, it puts a lot of risks for everyone. So, well, that meaning that your assets in US dollar can anyway, any day, any time can be frozen and used against you. Like they have frozen Russian assets and tried to use them to fund, to sponsor Ukrainian regime right now. So a lot of risks and sanctions. India was also under sanctions. And certainly, so this claim is not correct in terms of many aspects. So, and well, it's an attempt to lecture India, to try to condition India. So, not respecting Indian national interests. And it is absolutely no logic behind that. So no one is against the US dollar. Even Russia wants to use US dollar, but we don't have such an opportunity. So, and we do have, but it is very limited right now. That's why BRICS offers the options of alternative cooperation. So it doesn't mean that countries are prohibited to deal with anyone else. It's up to them. We act on consensus. We respect each other. And that is the nature why BRICS is so popular again among developing countries, among global South countries, because they don't want to choose sides and we don't condition them. So this is an absolutely new way of partnership, which is quite attractive for everyone. That's my comment on what has been said. Yeah. So then RIC. Russia into China. So, in fact, there is no demand for mediation of the Ukrainian crisis. We know that and China and India are taking very balanced approaches towards this crisis, respecting the position of every country involved, and certainly standing against putting pressure just on one side as a way to resolve the crisis, because sanctions don't resolve the problems and pressure doesn't resolve the problems. So it is just leading us to further escalation and mistrust. That's why actually we didn't see any intention from India or from China to mediate. Yes, there were some initiatives put forward, for example, by China in the United Nations. They have shaped up the group of the group for peace, or so. I don't remember the exact title, but again, so that was a discussion, club which was established in order to create some alternative to the Western promoted, unilateral approaches and mechanisms. For mediation, you need two sides to agree about that. There is no such agreement between Russia and Ukraine about mediators. Even Turkey is not a mediator right now. Well, it provides the venue. That's all. But as far as RIC format is concerned, this is the initiative which is rooted in 1990s, when the then Russian foreign minister and who became a prime minister, Yevgeny Primakov, has offered this concept of trilateral cooperation. Behind this concept is the basic understanding that these are three biggest powers in the Eurasian continent. And of course, the good relations between them would precondition or, would lead to the better stability in the region. Be it, framed in some organizational structure or institutionalized or not, it doesn't matter. The point is that we need to coordinate on the issues which are relevant for our region, for Eurasia, because who better than us would manage the situation over there? Because what happens with the external interventions, like what they did in Afghanistan or other regions, or trying to impose in the Pacific concept in a way that would separate India from China, So that is something actually we want to create bridges. We want to create a platform which would help us to build trust between us and to help manage the regional affairs in a better way. So we have established this format, which regularly was meeting at individually, that we were standalone ministerial meetings and even summits, or on the sidelines of the international meetings. So unfortunately, due to the situation between India and China of 2020, this cooperation in trilateral format stopped. But Russia has always advocated of the relevance and importance of this format because that would create just additional platform for us to better listen to each other, to better understand each other, and to get into some practical cooperation. So that's where we are. So well, we keep maintaining that this is important, and we keep motivating both sides that we should revive this mechanism.
Yes, I agree with you, sir, and also with the sensitivity in which you have often stated that Russia has never lectured India, which is actually a fact in the kind of patronizing US comments that have been going on for more visibly in the last week. Nitin is asking a question that is BRICS an alternative for in the future? Can it create an alternative for dollar? As dollar is being used by US often as a weapon of economics warfare. There are almost like if you add US, EU, UK, there are 20,000, more than 20,000 sanctions on Russia currently. So, do you think that a separate currency uh, could be the answer, at least for the global south?
Thank you. It is not in the agenda. It is not in the agenda. Let's proceed from the very important point that BRICS is functioning under a consensus. And for us, it's important that everyone agree on that. But first, there is no such intention, because realistically speaking, it's impossible right now to refuse to use the US dollar, because ultimately this is a global currency. And even under the sanctions, Russia is using it at the very limited extent, but still, when allowed. Then a lot of other countries like India, like Brazil, like South Africa, are using dollar to the great extent with when it comes to the cooperation with the US and other Western partners. So it would be against interests of the BRICS members to create some alternative currency and not to use US dollars. So well, we don't talk about that. But what we are talking about, let me put it again, very clearly, that we create alternatives. We create alternative possibilities, opportunities to promote cooperation based on our national interests, which would not be the target for unilateral sanctions, or which not be derailed by the desire of somebody from outside. So independent and alternative cooperation, which we are offering inside the BRICS, and that includes also the mechanisms which we introduce for the mutual payments to use national currencies, but not more than that. So nobody is talking about refusal from the US dollar. So well, it's not part to the BRICS agenda right now. So it's maybe just some theoretical possibility, but in practically speaking, it's we are not talking about that in practical terms.
Yeah. And my our last question, sir, is that what happened on 1st of June? in terms of how the media created the narrative of Ukraine and the trucks being the Trojan horse, and how this operation was carried out after 9 and 10 months. And at the same time, it was very, very interesting how the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer came and, without even being asked, he gave a speech that UK is in the form of war readiness. Um, there are some speculations that it was an MI6 operation going on social media. At the same time, it also created a certain kind of psychological anxiety uh, within Russians on the level of outreach that this operation was able to have. How do we understand it?
Let me start with the UK. So from even the 19th century, they were intentionally creating the image of Russia as a threat, because they were, well, this is a great game theory. So, well, they were afraid that Russia would challenge UK positions in India and in this region at that time. So ultimately, that became a part of the domestic policy, domestic discourse. When Russia is, to be blamed for everything. Russia is an enemy even without doing anything. Russia was the reason why the Malaysian aircraft was shot over the in Ukraine in 2014. Even they started blaming us even before it landed. Its parts were landed at the territory, so without any investigation. So, and these stories about poisoning of somebody, in the Ukrainian, the UK territory, without investigations, without giving us any proofs. What has happened? We offered so many times, so let's work on that. So please give us some details. So we never got a response. So this is a very typical thing. They just continue that. This is part of their policy, but practically speaking, Russia was never a threat to UK. So, and that was artificially created narrative, in order to move this, political trend in the West, while actually by creating this narrative, the military-industrial complex is receiving more money, more funds, and more, opportunities to earn. That became the part of the militarized policy of the European Union. So quite recently, they have decided to create some 150 billion euro fund to support Ukraine, and just taking this money from the humanitarian or climate change initiatives. So during the recent years, they have spent for Ukraine more than $200 billion or even more. While, have a look, the poorest countries are asking to support their sustainable development according to the Western obligations, but they never fulfill these obligations because they don't have money. But for Ukraine, they always have. So that's the difference. Certainly, the West is, fueling this conflict. This is sponsoring this conflict, because this conflict helps, to move, these, machines. Well, they still, are dreaming on getting the U.S. support, and quite scared when the Trump says you should raise your spending for defense up to 5%. So, which would be the economical disaster for the most European nations, which are now suffering from the growing inflation or the growing prices for the energy resources and so on and so forth. Because of that one, not because Russia something did, because they did it to Russia, and actually they created such a mess. So, and Ukraine is an anti-Russian project. So it is, you rightly said that it is not the war between Russia and Ukraine. This is exactly the war between Russia and the whole NATO potential. Because they supply weapons, they send military specialists, and they share intelligence. They are targeting the sophisticated weapons on the objects in Russia. So because Ukrainians are unable to do that. So certainly these events of the 1st of June, which you are asking about, were committed with the direct involvement of the UK and other European nations who are sharing the intelligence, who are sharing the technologies with Ukraine, who are supplying these weapons, and who are targeting these weapons to the precise locations, so whether it is with the military objects or even pure civil infrastructure like railways, like bridges. It was President Putin said this is an act of terror, and which was aimed deliberately to provoke us before the next round of negotiations. So, because if, for example, if we imagine that Russia is responding, is canceling this second round, so that would be a reason for them to claim that Russia is against talks. Have a look. So, and actually, they probably were hoping to persuade Trump that Russia is not delivering in terms of its commitment to the peace deal. So that which we have seen, but this terroristic attack is putting more questions than answers, because ultimately President Zelensky and his regime has complicated his position even much more, because now in the Russian society it is a big question. So since it is this regime is equalizing itself to the terrorist organization, whom should we talk to? There cannot be any talk to the terrorist organization. Then again, the questions of legitimacy of Zelensky. But nevertheless, we still believe that communication with the Ukrainian side is very important, because step by step, gradually we are moving towards something. At least we are now able to talk about some humanitarian issues and exchange of prisoners of wars, about the wounded people and even killed bodies. So that's an important part, that is small but still a progress in approaching each other on these humanitarian purposes. So. That's where we are. We are, and they say that they want the meeting between the presidents, but it's it's not the way how diplomacy is working. So before presidents meet, the ground should be prepared for that. The solution should be worked out, and everyone should work it out from all the perspectives, so that the leaders could just put their signature that, okay, so I speak, on behalf of the whole my nations, and I do agree with that. So it is premature to say that we need to move ahead to the leaders level. So, and that's also part of the rhetoric which we are, hearing from them after the second round of talks.
Yeah. And in fact, Scott Ritter, who is a former UN weapons inspector, former US MC intelligence officer, he actually wrote and tweeted that imagine for a minute if Mexican drug cartels launched a drone attack against B-52H strategic nuclear bomber bases in Minot, North Dakota, Louisiana, Missouri. Imagine that a significant number of these strategic aircraft were destroyed or damaged by these attacks. Now imagine these attacks were facilitated by China, Russia, or North Korea or Iran. What would you do? Now put yourself in Putin's shoes. He has gone through similar attack on his strategic nuclear assets. This attack was facilitated by UK, France, Germany, US with or without knowledge. What should he do? anything different from what you do. It is time to end the war in Ukraine. The problem is Ukraine and its European, NATO, and American allies. It's time to pull the plug on support for Ukraine. It's time to stand the Europeans, NATO, and American supporters of Ukraine down. Russia isn't the problem. We are. Do the right thing, save America, and save the world. So that is something which has to be, and this talk was definitely very interesting and enlightening because we were able to understand the other side, which is often missing from the media narrative. Um, there is a question which is about how social media and even AI is information biased, but the only answer to that is that every individual should do deep research without forming opinions just on the basis of fleeting coverage. Um, so, with this, sir, I would really like to thank you for the privilege of your time
Thank you.
and for being, so honest with us and giving us a perspective that is often not given the platform due to various reasons by various other platforms. Thank you for taking out the time to actually talk with scholars. Many of us you'll never meet in your life, but you were able to empower them and make them think. And the art of making someone think is the biggest gift one can give to someone else. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. So let me just make a small remark. So before the concluding, so let me tell you that unfortunately in the media, which is pro-Western in in many parts of the world, there is not much space for the Russian media outlets and the Russian opinion. Yes, we are present here in India. We are talking to the Indian journalists. We are participating in the programs, but it's not enough. You see, despite the extremely high level of our cooperation with India, we have not a single Indian journalist who is permanently working in Russia. So, well, you are not getting this information from the first source, so to say. So that's part of the problem. So, well, I hope that soon we will be in a position to have some. So, but anyway, let me reiterate that we are here very open to any kind of communication. So if there is an interest, I would be happy to join other programs. So because there are so many topics we can discuss, not only Ukrainian crisis. So since I was joking from the very beginning that here specialists on India, we became specialists on Ukraine. So, but we have so much to talk about Russia-India relations. There are so many aspects. So we are surviving a historic moment when we are reinventing ourselves. That's very interesting. If you decide so, if you wish, we can continue our discussion. So that's why I don't want to stop our communication here, but my offer is to continue.
Yes, definitely, and we'll invite you again, sir.
If there is an interest, because our relations are very sincere, and there is something which we proudly share with our friends, with students, especially with students, because that's an important part of all this social engagements, that we are spreading this information and trying to make the young people think and not to believe just something they hear from the from any source. So you need to learn to analyze and to compare the points of view. Only this combination of the different opinions would make you really think about the problem and try to understand it, because as some philosophers used to say that everyone can know, the point is to understand.
Yes, thank you so much, sir, and we will definitely ensure that there's another platform where you can talk about India-Russia relations and the changing dynamics right now soon enough. And we'll again invite you to MEI platform for your insights. And thank you so much for the privilege of your time.
All the best. Thank you.
Thank you.